Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to our learning session today, Navigating the Travel Rules. I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your schedule for the lunch hour today to join us and continue learning if you joined us yesterday or if you have joined us for previous webinars in the past about ethics laws in North Dakota, specifically the soon to be in place travel disclosure rules. So the focus of our lunchtime learning session today is going to be learning specifics about the travel disclosure rules, which are going to go into effect on July 1st of this year. The Ethics Commission adopted the travel disclosure rules at its April 24th, 2026 regular meeting for the purpose of increasing transparency, strengthening public trust in government, and to address a gap in North Dakota's disclosure framework. So yesterday, some of you may have joined us yesterday, the Commission hosted a webinar for the general public and individuals, anybody who wanted to join us, about the travel rules in general. But today we're going to narrow in on one specific thing, and that is how to report third-party funded travel. So although we have an hour set aside for our learning session today, because we're so narrowed and focused, I don't think we'll end up using that whole hour. So we'll leave plenty of time though for questions and answers. Let me introduce myself. I am Rebecca Binstock, and I have the privilege to serve as the Executive Director for the North Dakota Ethics Commission. With me today is Logan Carpenter. He serves as General Counsel for the Commission, and he's going to be taking over for me for part of this learning session today to talk about some things. So one thing I want to note before we start is if you have questions along the way, please do not hesitate to drop those in the chat. We will circle back to them during our question and answer portion at the end of the presentation. I also want to note, while both Logan and I are attorneys, we are not your attorneys. This webinar is to provide general education and not advice on a specific matter. We do not have an attorney-client relationship with you as the audience, our public educational presentations are in no way subject to attorney-client privilege. The Commission and its staff may have an adverse interest to those who violate ethics laws. Finally, if you need legal advice, you should seek your own counsel. So now with the legal stuff out of the way, as a way of introduction, I would like to introduce you to the Commission. So Logan and I have the privilege of working for currently 4 commissioners. These commissioners are appointed on consensus agreement of the governor, Senate Majority Leader, and the Senate Minority Leader. The current commissioners are Vice Chair Ron Goodman of Oaks, and as of just a few hours ago this morning, Chair Pamela Sharp of Bismarck, and then we have Commissioner Mark Western of West Fargo and Commissioner Jared Hubrights of Mandan. So currently you will see that we have an opening on the Commission. The Governor, Senate Majority Leader, and Senate Minority Leader are currently going through the process to select the Commission's 5th Commissioner. So with that, let's get into the substance of today. Our focus today is on who is required to file a travel disclosure statement and when those disclosure statements are due and what is included in those. We're also going to review how to do that. In other words, the mechanics of doing it. This review is intended to be more high level, but really a practical walkthrough of the travel disclosure form. If you would like a more in-depth review of the travel rules, a walkthrough of the text of the rules, the sanctions that may apply for noncompliance, the development of the rule, how the Commission focused its review, we'd invite you to review the recording from yesterday's webinar that covered that more general information. It is available on our YouTube channel. Thankfully, our communications liaison got that up for us, so it's already available. And also, if you want to learn more about the Commission, we have all of our previous webinars up. And I said YouTube channel, which I mean, but also you can access that through the website. If you attended yesterday's webinar, some of the information that you're hearing today is going to be a summary of that. So we hope that you expect that. But let's get into our schedule for today, or as we are phrasing it, our roadmap. So one, we're going to talk about who travel disclosures apply to. That is public officials. So we're going to talk about who are public officials. We're going to start with that. We're next going to move into an overview of the rules. We're going to briefly review the rules and the travel disclosures that those rules require. Next, which is going to be kind of the meat and potatoes of today, we're going to be talking about the filing requirement. We're going to discuss the deadlines and what then is included in the form, which is number 4. We're going to walk through the questions on the travel disclosure form, give you some poll questions to test your knowledge, and then demonstrate how to fill it out. So during our previous webinars, we've used polls to solicit responses from participants. We're bringing those back again today. We plan to do polls. Please know that sometimes with Teams, the polling function may not work on particular devices or browsers. That is okay. If you're not able to submit a response, no problem. Responses to the polls are not required. So let's dig into who is a public official. We'll start with number 1. So the travel disclosure rules apply only to public officials. Public officials include the following individuals: elected or appointed officials in the executive or legislative branch, members of the Ethics Commission, members of the governor's cabinet, and employees of the legislative branch. It's also important to know who public officials does not include. Public official, the term does not include non-appointed executive branch employees, members of the judicial branch, and then local officials, state, county, township. Those individuals are not included. So we have 4 groups of people who are included in the definition of public official. This is who the rules apply to. So now, this is a little jumpy today, there we go. Let's talk about the focus of the rules and how the commission focused the rules as not to be duplicative. So back in 2023, the commission started learning about and doing some research on travel and financial disclosures. In that process, the commission learned some travel by public officials that's taken in relation to their status as public officials is not reported anywhere in the state system. As the commission developed a rule to require more travel disclosure, however, it wanted to avoid duplication. It didn't want public officials to have to report travel to both the commission and if it's also reported in a central area within the state system already. They did not want duplication. So the commission learned that there are 2 main areas where travel is already reported by public officials. One is through the state's enterprise resource planning system, what most people commonly know as PeopleSoft. The next way that, or the other central area within the state system where we already have travel reporting, is the Legislative Assembly's report on out-of-state meeting form. So let's talk about PeopleSoft, or the state's enterprise resource planning system. This system tracks when public officials request travel reimbursement or per diem through vouchers. It also tracks when travel is paid in advance by state agencies. The public can access some of this information through the state checkbook on OMB's website. You can go and do that. It's fairly easy to use. You can also request additional information through an open records request. If we look at the second way that travel is already reported, that Legislative Assembly report on out-of-state meeting form, this form tracks when legislators take travel that is paid out of Legislative Council's budget. It also can track when legislators travel to events funded by organizations that the Legislative Assembly pays a membership fee to. This information is done on paper, but it can be accessed through an open records request. So as the commission was considering disclosure rules for third-party funded travel or for travel, it really wanted to narrow the concept of the rule in relation to, one, the public official's status as a public official, and to travel that is not otherwise reported. So the commission assigned the term for this type of travel to be third-party funded travel. So let me say that again. Third-party funded travel is travel that's taken in relation to a public official's status as a public official and is not reported somewhere else. So as a result, if travel is currently reported in PeopleSoft or on the Legislative Assembly's report on out-of-state meeting form, it does not need to be reported to the commission on the travel disclosure form. So with that, I'm going to forward this over and we're going to dig into the definition of third-party funded travel with Logan.
Thanks, Rebecca. So third-party funded travel is that travel that must be reported to the commission. And this is travel that includes travel within or outside the state, travel that's undertaken by a public official or the public official's immediate family, travel taken in relation to the public official's status as a public official, and it includes travel paid with federal, state, tribal, or local public funds. Now, you may be asking, what's the definition of immediate family? The commission included a definition of that term in the rules, and immediate family includes a parent, sibling, child by blood, adoption, or marriage, a spouse, a grandparent, or a grandchild. So this is what third-party funded travel includes. Now let's talk about what it excludes. The commission created some exceptions to the definition of third-party funded travel in the travel disclosure rules. So it does not include, one, travel taken unrelated to the public official status as a state public official, two, travel paid with a public official's personal or campaign finances, three, travel that is confidential under state law, four, travel to actively support or oppose a candidate or political party, and finally, five, policy monitored travel. Policy monitored travel is another term that's within the rules, and this is the term that the commission assigned to travel that's already reported to the state within PeopleSoft or on the Legislative Assembly's report on out-of-state meeting form. Creating this term, policy monitored travel, formalizes the commission's intent not to require duplication of travel that is reported already in the state system. So let's talk a little bit about the deadline. When are travel disclosure statements due? They're due with the commission 15 days following the conclusion of third-party funded travel. Sanctions, including monetary sanctions, may apply for late filings. For a breakdown of the sanctions that may apply, please review our recording from yesterday's webinar where we went into those in more detail. For now, we said we were going to bring some poll questions to you today, so we're going to launch a poll question on the deadline issue. Get it up here for you. Poll question 1. Legislator Sally Roosevelt traveled to Boston on a third-party funded trip. She filed her travel disclosure form before she left for the trip. Did she meet the requirements for filing on time? A, yes, as long as she updates the form within 45 days of the conclusion of her trip. B, yes, she is permitted to file before the trip or within 15 days following her return. C, no, she must file the travel disclosure form after going on her trip. And D, no, legislators are entirely prohibited from taking third-party funded trips. Give you about 30 seconds here to get an answer in, and then we'll take a look at how we did. Okay, the responses are tapering off here, so I'm going to close the poll and let's take a look. So 81% of you said B. Yes, she is permitted to file before the trip or within 15 days following her return. That is the correct answer. Sally can file the disclosure prior to her trip or within 15 days upon her return. The rule requires within 15 days following the conclusion of the travel, but the commission will happily accept travel disclosures filed before the travel takes place as well, if you have all the required information to submit to the commission before you even go on the trip. Now that we covered who the travel rules apply to, what type of travel must be reported, and the deadline for filing, let's discuss what actually goes on that travel disclosure statement. The statement must include 1, the purpose of the travel, 2, the destinations visited, 3, the dates of travel, 4, the sources of funds used to finance all travel-related expenses, 5, an estimate of the amount expended, or if known, the actual amount expended, 6, whether the expenses were for air transportation, ground transportation, lodging, meals, entertainment, or other activities. And finally, 7, the number of accompanying immediate family members, if any. For this last one, please note it is just the number of immediate family members. It does not require disclosure of the names of the family members. The commission has created a web form with all the required information. Public officials will use the web form to submit their travel disclosure statements. I will note it is currently in draft form. We're working with NDIT to finalize the form. When the travel disclosure rules come into effect on July 1st, that form will be the correct version. So now that we've discussed what is required, let's walk through how to submit travel disclosure statements with that web form. To find the form, please navigate to the ethicscommission.nd.gov. From there, you can click on the Forms tab, and then the drop-down menu option for travel disclosure resources, and the form will populate right there on the page once you click the link. Again, please note it is in draft format until July 1st when the rules go into effect. If you ever have technical issues submitting the form, please reach out to our office. We're here to help you and want to assist you to make sure they are filed on time. The page will also have other resources and information available along the side here if you have any questions as you submit your travel disclosure statements. So let's walk through the sections of the form and what goes on them. The first section is going to be information about the traveler information. It begins with some generic background information, including the public official's name and the public official's position with the state. So the commission knows who is submitting the form, and the public as well once it is populated on the commission's website. The commission also accepts forms submitted by a representative of the public official on behalf of the public official. That's the easy stuff. So let's move along and get to the actual travel information. It turns to the details of the trip the public official took, and it includes the destination visited for the third-party funded travel. Here, a filer will put the city and state, or if not in the US, the city and country of where they visited. It also asks for the travel start date, the travel end date, the purpose of the travel. Here, a filer will put a short description of why they are traveling. And finally, it'll ask the number of any accompanying family members, if any. Again, please note it's just the number, not the names of the family members, to ensure and respect those individuals' privacy. So we have a couple poll questions on the travel information for you too. So I'm going to launch the first one. Poll question 2 here. Legislator Rose Prairie received an invitation from Thundering Bison LLC to fly to Bozeman, Montana, and attend a 3-day conference about rural economic development. She was invited because during her career as a legislator, she works extensively in this area of public policy. She told her grandparents about the trip, and they said they always wanted to visit Bozeman. Legislator Prairie reached out to Thundering Bison LLC to see if they would pay for her grandparents' airfare and hotel so they could go to Bozeman with her. The company agreed, and they all flew out to Bozeman together. Does Legislator Prairie have to report her grandparents on her travel disclosure form? Yes or no? Give you about 30 seconds to get your answer in. Okay, let's close the poll here and take a look. 100% said yes, and that is the correct answer. Third-party funded travel includes travel undertaken by members of the public official's immediate family. An immediate family does include grandparents of the public official. Even if they might have not attended the conference that Legislator Prairie went to, the airfare was covered by the company who invited her to attend the conference. So Legislator Prairie would need to indicate on the form that she had 2 members of her immediate family accompanying her. Got another poll question here for you. Launched. Poll question 3. The Pastry Association sponsored a trip to Fargo for public officials to visit the local coffee shops and bakeries in the area and to learn more about small businesses. During the trip, public officials traveled around the Fargo-Moorhead metropolitan area and enjoyed coffee and treats in Fargo, West Fargo, and Horace. The Pastry Association paid for their gas, meals, and their stay at Hotel Bison, which was in downtown Fargo. Which locations, if any, do the public officials report on their travel disclosure form? A, Fargo, West Fargo, Horace, and each business they visited. B, Fargo, West Fargo, and Horace. C, Fargo. D, none of the above. The trip was within the state of North Dakota and therefore exempt from the travel disclosure rules. So I'll give you a little bit of time there to get your answer in. Give you about 10 more seconds if you still want to submit a response. Okay, let's close the poll and take a look. This one's a little bit more mixed. 65% of you said B, Fargo, West Fargo, and Horace. And that is the correct answer. Each town on the trip is considered a destination under the rules. The form does not require disclosure of each business that was visited. However, the form requests disclosure of the cities they traveled to in relation to the sponsored trip. Even if the trip was in North Dakota, the public official's trip was paid for by a third party, and it was in relation to their status as public officials. So it does meet the definition of third-party funded travel and would be disclosed on the travel disclosure form. So let's move along here and talk a little bit about the funding information. The form does ask questions about who funded the travel. These questions include the source of funds used to finance all travel-related expenses. Here, a filer will put who ultimately is paying for the travel, even if they are waiting for a reimbursement. It may be multiple individuals or organizations for some travel, and a filer should list all sources. Next, you put the estimated or actual amount spent for expenses, including lodging and meals. The commission recognizes in some instances it may be difficult to determine the actual dollar amount, and that is why an estimate suffices. There may also be instances where a public official does not receive reimbursement by the time filing is due, so that's why it's an estimated amount. The form does not require receipts or invoices of any kind, just a general estimate of the amount for expenses. Finally, the form will ask for expenses paid categories, and a filer will check all that apply. These include air transportation, ground transportation, lodging, meals, entertainment, and any other activities. For this last category, a written description is needed for any activities that don't meet any of the other general categories. Please remember, if the travel is paid with personal or campaign finances, it is not reported on this form. So with that in mind, we have a couple more poll questions. These are going to be our last two for this webinar. Let's get started with poll 4. Poll 4, legislator Sally Roosevelt's trip was funded by 3 different organizations. Dakota Charter Service paid for her flight, Bismarck Catering paid for her meals, and Dakota Transportation paid for her car service throughout town. Which of the organizations does she need to report on her travel disclosure form? A, only Dakota Charter Service because airfare is the only required reporting expense. B, only Dakota Charter and Dakota Transportation because only travel/transit expenses must be reported. C, all 3, Dakota Charter Service, Bismarck Catering, and Dakota Transportation. And D, none, because multiple co-sponsors are not allowed for third-party funded trip. So get your answers in, and then we will see how we did. About 10 more seconds here. And closing the poll. Got a smart group today. 100% of you said C, all 3. That is the correct answer. Public officials are required to disclose the source of funds for all travel-related expenses. So let's do our last poll question, which I think you might find easier than the others. We'll see. Poll 5. Public official Dusty Gravel Road drives his farm pickup to the local Walmart to purchase some oil for his tractor. Public official Gravel Road paid for the fuel in his pickup himself. Does public official Gravel Road need to report his trip to Walmart to the Ethics Commission? Yes or no? I'll give you about 10 more seconds on this one. Okay, let's close the poll and take a look. And that question was way too easy for you because the correct answer is no, and 100% of you got it correct. Public official Gravel Road paid for the travel with his personal finances. The travel was also not in relation to his status as a public official. It was related to his status as a farmer. Therefore, he's not reporting that to the Ethics Commission. So let's wrap up here and talk about, once the travel disclosure form is filed, where does it go and what does the commission do with it? Well, the commission put in the rules that completed travel disclosure forms must be made publicly accessible through the commission's website. The commission will maintain those completed travel disclosure statements for a complete calendar year for a period of 3 years. It will be similar to how the commission currently hosts our meeting notice and conflict of interest forms. If you're interested in seeing what that looks like on the back end, I'd invite you to go take a look at those tabs on our website where we currently have some submitted forms for those rules. Finally, let's talk about the effective date. The commission adopted the rules on April 24th of this year, giving the rules an effective date of July 1st. of 2026, so in a couple weeks here. The commission expects it will receive the first group of completed travel disclosure statements around the middle of July, given the 15-day timeframe to complete travel disclosure statements. If you think you're going to be the first one, though, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, but a public official already submitted one, so shout out to them for being early and testing out our form. One last thing, if you have specific questions regarding a specific trip as a public official may consider requesting an official advisory opinion from the commission. According to the statute creating the advisory opinion process, an individual who relies on an advisory opinion issued by the commission may not be subject to ethical, civil, or criminal penalties, provided that individual acts in good faith and the material facts surrounding the public official's action are substantially the same as the conduct presented in the advisory opinion. If you're interested, more information is available on advisory opinions on the commission's website. Again, you can go take a look at those and what that process entails. There's also a quick guide available that gives you some more information on advisory opinions. So I'm going to hand it back over to Rebecca to close us out here. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that run through, Logan. So we have, I believe there's a few questions that have been dropped in the chat. Maybe not, but before then, before we take questions, I want to just remind everybody that this webinar this learning session, along with the commission's previous webinar from yesterday about the travel disclosure rules, is available on the commission's website as well as our YouTube channel at ND Ethics Commission. I want to make sure that everybody has access to that. You are going to receive an email from us later this week with a slide deck with the information as well as a post-attendance survey. The other thing that will be included in that email is dates for office hours that the commission staff is going to be holding over the next several weeks through August to assist with filing of the forms. If you do have questions, we timed it so that hopefully we'll make it within that 15-day window. You're always free to call and ask us filing questions though. And so I'm going to say it now, although it will be included in the email as well. Those office hours that we're going to be holding are over the lunch hour from 12 to 1 on July 15th, July 29th, and August 19th. Don't worry if you can't write those down. We'll include those in the email, as I've already said. Also, if you are a statewide elected official or a member of the Legislative Assembly, you should have received a postcard from the commission, likely late last week, with a QR code. If you use that QR code, you can take that postcard with you and you can scan that QR code. It will lead you right to the resource page on the travel disclosure rules on the Ethics Commission's website, and then you can fill out your form that way. We wanted to get that information in your hands. So if you want an additional postcard, you may have lost yours or thrown it in the garbage, please feel free to reach out. So with that, let's turn to questions. I know that there is a few in the chat. Logan, you want to assist us with those?
First one, do they apply to an appointed position within a department?
There's a little bit more to it. Sorry, I'm reading.
Well, it's a compound question, but starting with the first one, do they apply? A public official includes an appointed individual, and that's who the rules apply to, public officials, elected and appointed.
Mm-hmm.
And the next part is we report out-of-state travel through the PeopleSoft system. There is no reporting required for in-state travel ? Is in-state travel exempt from these rules?
So that's a little bit of a, I think let's answer the last question before we answer the next question. So is in-state travel exempt from these rules? No, in-state travel is not exempt from the rules. There is no reporting for in-state travel. So if I think I'm a little confused, but
you might want to go take a look in PeopleSoft. Usually that is tracked. And for our agency at the commission, when we travel to have our meetings, all that information for hotel rooms, state fleet vehicles, if somebody uses their private vehicle, all that reimbursement information is tracked in PeopleSoft.
Mhm.
So you may want to go take a look at what your agency is actually reporting in PeopleSoft, because a lot of that in-state travel is already in there.
Yep. But if you have specific questions, we can talk more on more specifics, either during one of those office hours or after the webinar or the learning session. All right, there's a long one, so give us a minute here.
I'll read it out loud. For out-of-state or in-state travel to a conference, there generally is always a conference fee, but we all know that there are also many sponsorship dollars collected to host these conferences. As part of the conference, there is a tour of a fee or an event where travel is required. Is this bus trip to an event that is part of the conference but also shows a sponsor for the event need to be reported separately, or is the PeopleSoft form sufficient to cover this travel?
What is that PeopleSoft?
I'm a little confused on what you mean by the PeopleSoft form. If you're referring to the travel disclosure form, that might be a more event specific type scenario that may be better to answer through an advisory opinion. Just so we can clarify the facts of what you're asking, I guess.
I agree with that. I think the next question expands on that one.
Expanding on that question, if a public official drives their own vehicle in-state and gets reimbursed through PeopleSoft, disclosure isn't required. If they use a state fleet vehicle for the same in-state trip, disclosure is required, no lodging or food for the event. Is that correct? So I believe state fleet vehicles are also going to be tracked through PeopleSoft.
Yes, that is. That is already tracked. That is tracked through PeopleSoft. So no, that is not required to be disclosed on this form. If you actually go and look at the state checkbook, you can look at state fleet. It's coded in a particular way on PeopleSoft. Great question though. We'll see. Victoria, thank you for dropping those virtual office hours in the chat. That is extremely helpful. We really appreciate that. You can see those right there, and then there's links to those.
Next question, what if travel is funded by a country where it would be considered quite insulting to ask for the meal costs, etc.? So that's one of those scenarios where the commission recognizes that you might not have the actual amount, but a general estimate is what the commission's looking for. So if you can look at what they're feeding you, get a general estimate for what that maybe costs in the country, maybe you're ordering off a menu, just keep a note of that for later. It does not have to be the exact amount.
Nope.
Okay. Last question I'm seeing here. If a participant pays a registration fee to attend a conference, but there are additional conference activities paid by sponsors that the participant is invited to attend, but do not have to pay any additional fees. Some are for all participants, some are for selected participants. Are these considered reportable? An out-of-state authorization prior to travel would have been submitted. I guess I'm confused on the prior to travel, if you're doing that through your agency.
These considered out-of-state authorization prior to travel. We might have to get more specifics on that one. There's a little bit of a, I think we need clarification to be able to answer that. So if we could touch base after the webinar, I think that would be good. Okay, moving to the next question.
Can you clarify if an appointed official travels to an event that is paid for by an association, if that official brings a family member such as a spouse, however, the official pays for all the spouse's expenses out of pocket themselves, does the spouse's travel need to be reported? That's a good question. So the answer is no, because that's travel that's funded with personal finances. In the definition of third-party funded travel, personally financed travel is excluded. So if the spouse's travel is paid for by the personal finances, it's excluded from the rules and is not reported to the commission.
Yep, that is a question that has come up several times before, because that's a common a common practice. So thank you for asking that question today. There's another question and it says, do you mean that state travel already in PeopleSoft through the timesheet? I think what this is referencing is if there is any travel or travel related expenses reported in PeopleSoft, it does not need to come to the Ethics Commission. That would be duplicative. We don't want duplicative filings. So you will see in PeopleSoft how you submit vouchers or the state fleet request, how that's paid. P-card is managed in PeopleSoft. Anything in PeopleSoft does not come over to the commission or is reportable to the commission.
So related question then, when you say PeopleSoft, do you mean PeopleSoft Financials or the travel module or both?
We mean both. Anything reported in PeopleSoft. And the reason that we use PeopleSoft is because that information is then publicly available on OMB's website through the state checkbook. So whether you see it or your supervisor is doing it in PeopleSoft Financials versus the travel module, that's a great question. Anything in PeopleSoft is not reportable to the commission. We'll give just another second. Thank you for the great questions. For those of you who asked, fact-specific questions that maybe we didn't understand the question entirely, I apologize for us not understanding, but please feel free to reach out to us and we can maybe ask questions and have a dialogue back and forth to be able to help you with those filings. I'm not seeing any other questions. I think I'll hang on for just a moment in case there are, so I'm going to let the awkward silence be there.
Just got a question. What about travel by an appointed official employed by an agency that uses a system other than PeopleSoft for their accounting and reporting?
So that is also a great question. We got that question yesterday, and I'm going to follow up with you on that question because that is something that we need to research a little bit more before we can answer that, but that is a great question. We also got that one yesterday after the webinar that we did. So I think we will do that. Yes.
Another question here. Licensing/regulatory board members. If the board pays for a board member to attend a conference, so does not receive a scholarship or anything, does that get reported?
So Sandy, I think your question is a little, sorry, don't mean to call you out specifically. I apologize for doing that. But I think that question relates a little bit to the previous question. And so we need to work through that. But assuming, I'm going to presume that that is in a PeopleSoft reporting where that is paid, then that would not be reported to the commission. I think we need to look at that previous question. Yes, that is correct. So Sandy, we will follow up, calling you out. We will follow up with you on that one.
That's it for questions.
That is it for questions. Thank you for everybody who listened today. Again, just a reminder, you will be getting a post-attendance email with additional information as well as the slide deck. Of course, our session today was recorded and will be available. Please feel free to visit our website for any additional information, and you can always reach out to us with questions. Again, thank you and have a great afternoon.